A very interesting tweet came out not long ago from Adam Stern regarding Toni Breidinger, and boy do I have a lot to say about it. Now you could look at this tweet and say it sounds positive, and it is a positive. Credit to Toni, her marketing and PR team. Obviously they're doing something right if Cup sponsors are gravitating towards her. But let's look at the grand scope of this. Is this really positive news for NASCAR itself? Many would disagree with me on this, but I don't think it is. Let's talk about Toni Breidinger. She's been a part-time ARCA driver within the past couple of years. Even though she hasn't run a full season in any NASCAR series, she's become a household name. Toyota is very high on her if you couldn't tell. She's in a Toyota commercial that constantly plays during NASCAR races, and she's getting some really great opportunities with great teams. She drives for Venturini Motorsports, which is by far the best team in ARCA, and that's been the case for years now. She's also gotten a few opportunities to drive for Tricon Garage, which is the flagship Toyota team in the NASCAR Truck Series. Great opportunities she's gotten, but hasn't taken advantage of them. As of recording this video, she only has 14 top 10s and 42 ARCA starts, and 2 top 5s, and hasn't even snipped victory lane. This is in top equipment, by the way. Now to her credit, she's gotten a little bit better. She's running in the top 10 a little bit more, which isn't really saying a whole lot because it's the ARCA series. There's only about 10 competitive cars, but credit where credit is due. And hey, she knows how to hold it wide open at super speedways now. I'm not kidding, she actually was letting up in the corners and losing the draft until her spotter told her to keep it wide open the whole time.
Toni, are you wide open?
I'm wide open right now.
Were you lifting getting into the corner at all?
Before I was, now I'm not.
Yeah, you can't. It's drafting. Wide open the whole damn time. We can't lose the draft.
So yeah, she's shown improvement but still underperforming. She has a top 15 and 2 truck starts, but she only got that because of attrition. A good portion of the field was wrecked out or had damage. The only credit you can give her is that she kept the truck clean, but it's not like she drove up into the top 15 off of pure pace. So you got an ARCA driver that's part-time and hasn't put up good results, but is attracting sponsors. Can you really sit here and say it's because she's a female? I don't think you can. If that was the case, sponsors would be lining up to sponsor Hailie Deegan. This might be news to people, but Hailie Deegan doesn't have a whole lot of sponsors behind her. She's always talking about how she's constantly looking for sponsorship, and her lack of sponsorship probably explains why she's not in the Xfinity series at the moment. And Hailie Deegan does just as good of a job putting herself out there than Toni Breidinger. As a matter of fact, Hailie Deegan has well over 1 million followers on Instagram, 3 million followers on TikTok, and has over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. Compare that to Toni Breidinger on those 3 platforms. Toni is behind Hailie Deegan in every single one of those. And in my opinion, Hailie is a better race car driver than Toni. That's not saying a whole lot looking at Hailie Deegan's NASCAR career so far, but at least Hailie has won in NASCAR before. 3 wins in the ARCA West Series and has shown a little bit more versatility. I know this is probably coming off as a Toni Breidinger versus Hailie Deegan video at this point, but it's not. I'm just trying to point out that Breidinger isn't attracting sponsors simply because she's a girl. So what separates Toni Breidinger from Hailie Deegan besides Deegan having a slightly better racing resume? Well, in 2022, Toni Breidinger became a Victoria's Secret model. After she partnered up with them, it seemed like she's gotten more exposure, and I think sponsors, big time sponsors, have taken notice. Now that Toni Breidinger is a model, does that make her a sponsorship magnet all of a sudden? It kind of seems that way, but I don't want to sit here and say that's definitely the case. It's kind of odd because they're both young, attractive females, but yet one picks up a Victoria's Secret deal while the other one kind of struggles to pick up sponsorship in general. I'm probably just overthinking this. Maybe Toni Breidinger's PR team is better than Deegan's at least. The Victoria's Secret deal is the biggest sponsor she's landed. I think in general, Toni surrounded herself with a very great team within the past year that are going out there and snagging her sponsorship deals like Victoria's Secret, and now have his Cup sponsors interested in her. Something I really want to know is, how do Cup Series drivers feel about Toni Breidinger getting all this sponsor attention? An ARCA driver that isn't successful on track is generating more sponsor interest than the top Cup guys. You telling me one of the most marketable drivers in NASCAR is an underperforming ARCA driver? I think this perfectly describes today's NASCAR. Your on-track performance doesn't really mean nothing at all. If you bring sponsorship, no matter how bad you are on track, you can end up in the best equipment. They say winning fixes everything, and that's something that you can't even say is true anymore. Maybe 15 to 20 years ago and on back, but now that isn't the case anymore. Your job is to go out there and win races and championships, and you assume sponsorship and other things will come your way, but nowadays it doesn't. Examples: Brett Moffitt won the 2017 Truck Series Championship but got released from his ride because he didn't bring sponsorship. Furniture Row Racing won the 2017 Cup Series Championship, and then a year later, they had to shut down. That type of success on track should gain you sponsors, but it doesn't. It speaks to how poor the business model is in NASCAR. Teams rely on sponsorship heavily, and it's the reason why teams are asking for a bigger piece of the pie when it comes to the next TV contract, so teams won't have to rely on sponsorship so much. NASCAR has become niche over the past decade, so that definitely doesn't help things as well. So many sponsors have gone away, notable sponsors like Coors Light, Best Buy, Home Depot, Lowe's, Pepsi, and recently M&M's. It's mostly NASCAR's fault for its downfall, but I feel like drivers don't help the situation. It's their fault, but at the same time it's not. It's weird. The top Cup Series guys are going out there and doing their primary job, and that's performing at a high level on the track, winning races and championships, but aren't generating the sponsor interest Toni Breidinger is. They're doing their job on track, but it's not really paying off. But you look at some of these top Cup Series guys and they don't market themselves. They don't put themselves out there. They do the bare minimum at most, but it's not enough to generate sponsors. And in general, you're not exposing NASCAR to people. Yes, it's NASCAR's job to promote their top stars, but drivers need to promote themselves as well. Toni Breidinger being one of the most marketable drivers in NASCAR and isn't even in the top 3 series is not a good look for NASCAR when you really sit down and think about it. How do you think casuals will view that? Someone that's in the lower divisions and not that competitive is one of NASCAR's more marketable drivers. It doesn't make sense to the hardcore fans, but it definitely wouldn't make sense to the casuals. I think if Toni Breidinger wasn't underperforming in ARCA, I probably wouldn't have made this video, even though I would still find it kind of strange that an ARCA driver is one of the more marketable NASCAR drivers currently. Like I said earlier, Toni Breidinger has improved. She's not wrecking and she's finding herself in the top 10 a little bit more often. Yeah, I don't think she's anything special behind the wheel, but what I think hurts her is not being full-time. If she runs a full season in ARCA or trucks, I feel like she can possibly show even more improvement. With sponsors having interest in her now, it shouldn't surprise anybody if she ends up full-time in one of these series next year. ARCA will be more ideal, but sponsors will probably want her on a bigger stage, so she'll probably find herself in a truck ride. She's a Toyota driver, so Tricon Garage or Hattori Racing will most likely be the only 2 options. Once again, this is great news for Toni Breidinger and Toni Breidinger only. I hope her on-track performance can get better, because if she's generating this much sponsor interest now, imagine if she started having success on track and became one of the top prospects. I'm not expecting that from her just from what I've seen so far, but it would be nice to see. So yeah, just imagine telling a NASCAR fan 15 years ago that an underperforming ARCA driver would have Cup sponsors interested in that driver. It actually sounds crazy now, but it just tells you where NASCAR currently is when it comes to its popularity and its business model. I do hope things begin to change for the better as soon as possible. I want to hear from y'all now. What are y'all thoughts on this news, and what are y'all thoughts on Toni Breidinger as a driver? Do you think she'll ever win anything in NASCAR? Do you see her being in the Cup Series one day? Do you think she starts outperforming Hailie Deegan in the future? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to go ahead and roll up out of here. Y'all have a good one. Peace.